Welcome back, all you lovely people. Ready to talk more about Aristotle? Well, I'll talk, you listen, take notes. No? Oh, well, we're trying. I like Aristotle. I really think he's cool because as we're seeing here now, Aristotle is in this module, we're seeing how Aristotle is looking again at the rational part of our soul. And he is really kind of emphasizing now how the rational part of our soul is about this capacity for knowledge and truth. Pretty cool. And the intellectual excellences of the soul are the excellences that allow us to attain knowledge. And recall that knowledge in this context, we are just talking about, again, knowledge is the reason's possession of the truth. And so, yeah, the intellectual excellences are trying to let our reason grasp the truth. And now we also saw, though, that, okay, so if knowledge is kind of the general purpose of the rational part of the soul, we broke this down into two parts. We have a scientific part, and we have that calculative or deliberative part of our reason. And so, of course, that then leads Aristotle to say, well, if there's these two parts of the soul, of the rational part of the soul, then, well, there should be types of knowledge associated with each. So we can talk about scientific knowledge, which is, again, that knowledge of the necessary, the universal, the eternal, the unchanging. And then we saw those three excellences, those three intellectual excellences, the intellectual accomplishment of Sophia, the systematic knowledge of episteme, the intelligence of nous. And of course, I mentioned in the last video towards the end that none of these are about action, right? They're about contemplation, about, just learning for learning's sake, maybe? I don't know how you think about it. Again, that's like logic, science, and math, right? These are just things, these are like the pure sciences. This is not applied. This is just pure studying these things just to learn about them and for nothing further. So yeah, so some of you might, this might be a stretch, we'll see. I liked calculus when I was in your age, but look, there are some weirdos who just love calculus. It's kind of cool, and they want to learn more about it. They learn derivatives, and then they learn integration, and they learn about all sorts of crazy stuff you can do there. I thought it was kind of fun when I was, whatever, I'm a nerd. But yeah, so people just like want to learn calculus, and yeah, they keep learning calculus, and maybe they go into more and more, from calculus, they jump into abstract algebra and then topology, and gosh, I don't know, there's all sorts of cool stuff, and and maybe graph theory. Oh, there's so much cool stuff. But you just learn about these things to learn about it, right? Because it's like, wow, it's neat. But other people, maybe they like calculus because they want to apply it, but really, they just apply it, like, say, to physics. I tell you what, when I took, quantum mechanics, I was stunned to learn that we did integration, calculus, right? What? Why do these particles obey this stuff? I don't know. It was kind of cool. But again, you're just using, so you're either learning about calculus because you like calculus and math, or you're learning about calculus because you can then apply it in areas like physics. But again, you're just using it to contemplate and learn either about math or about the world, but there's not about action here. Unless, of course, say you're like an engineer who also need to know calculus. But engineers, I assume, don't like calculus to learn about math. They need calculus because it's often needed to build stuff, and that's pretty wild too. So yeah, so some people just want to learn about the world, like physics, subatomic particles, all that kind of stuff, but other people want to learn calculus because they need to use it for action. Building bridges. That always blows my mind that engineers need to know calculus. Well done, guys. And so, but now we're shifting. When we start thinking about engineering, right, they're not learning for knowledge's sake. They're learning this because they need to act, to build stuff. So that brings us over to the second type of knowledge, which is the calculative and deliberative knowledge, again, of the contingent, the particular, the temporal, the knowledge that's about, actually acting in a certain way. And so here Aristotle is going to say, because of course, when we're talking about the scientific part, truth is truth, right? It either corresponds to the math problem or the subatomic particles or whatever. But here, the truth is about action. And truth in the calculative or deliberative part, truth then it involves just knowing the right thing to do. And the right thing to do given the particulars of the situation. And I love engineering as a great example of that, because an engineer, yes, an engineer does need to calculate and deliberate, right? Because the engineer needs to look at the particulars of what is being created, what's this thing for, what's it going to need to be made of, where is it being created? And now as I say all that, it's kind of cool. That it sounds like engineers really need to go back to Aristotle's doctrine of the four causes, because it looks like all those things are going to be relevant for the engineer. And I think that's pretty cool. Cool. I'm trying to sell Aristotle. He's fascinating. For a guy who's, over 2 million, yes, back with Aristotle and the dinosaurs. No, over someone who, was doing this all 2,000 years ago. He's so relevant for, I think, how we understand things. Anyway. When talking about the excellence of engineers, Aristotle would be calling this technical expertise, or techne. And techne just refers to the ability to produce or create something correctly. Again, techne, the ability to produce or create something correctly. And so, yes, that is an intellectual excellence of, again, technical expertise of techne. And so, yes, a good engineer produces good structures. A good doctor produces good health. Good artisans, I guess, produce good chairs, good pots, whatever. The ancient Greeks like to talk about pots, pottery and things. But or a good artist produces good works of art. A good dancer creates a good performance. A good musician produces good music. All these are variety, again, from engineering to dancing, right? These are all elements of techne, because you're producing something, whether it's a bridge or a performance. Either way, techne is the excellence for doing those types of things well. Kind of cool now, right? And so Aristotle, this is also kind of interesting. Aristotle notes that when you're talking about techne, you're assuming that the activity is only instrumentally important, because what really matters is that end result. Was it a good performance? Was it a good bridge? Did it produce good health? Aristotle thinks we're less concerned about the actions that lead there when we're talking about techne, because when the doctor comes to you, all you really ultimately care about is the doctor going to make you healthy. When the engineer is building the bridge or whatever the structure, we care, did they build it correctly? Does it hold up? Maybe with dancing and music, the activity is part of the performance, but ultimately we won't really care much as long as the music sounds good or the dance recital or performance looks good as well, right? How does it come together in the spectacle, if you're thinking like that, the performance? But again, all Aristotle's going to say is all that matters is the end result in these different technes, these different activities. So yeah, that's how we evaluate it, is by the end result. Is the end result good? So techne is good for telling you the right actions to give you that right final product. But at the end of the day, it is about making the correct product. And so as we've seen, though, it's kind of cool that techne represents a lot of different particular kind of excellences, because we have the excellence of an engineer, the excellence of a doctor, the excellence of an artisan, the excellence of a dancer, the excellence of a musician. And yeah, so we have lots of different kind of sub-techne, I forget the plural for that. But technical expertise will be different based on those different things. Again, depending on what profession you belong to, the thing that you produce at the end of the day, the performance, the bridge, whatever. So that's kind of cool. But Aristotle also wants us to consider there's another excellence about action. It's not about what makes you a good doctor or a good performer. It's what excellence of the intellect makes you a good person. Because yes, there's excellences that the techne, the techni, some ancient Greek person correct me. We have the techne for the good engineer, the techne for the good doctor, but what about the excellence of a good person? And Aristotle says this intellectual excellence will not be about technical expertise, because this excellence that Aristotle's thinking of that makes you a good person is not about producing something. Remember, techne are about producing something. Technical excellence, you're producing an end result, a pot, a bridge, a good performance, good music, whatever it is. No, he wants something, again, that's about the excellence of the activity itself. It's not about the end result. It's about the activity. And in particular, of course, what makes the activity that makes a good person is an activity of living well. This is hopefully starting to sound familiar, because yes, Aristotle says there needs to be an excellence, an intellectual excellence for living well. And so, yes, hopefully you see where this is going, as we're looking at an intellectual excellence needed for eudaimonia, an intellectual excellence needed for happiness, an intellectual, it's all the same thing. Eudaimonia, happiness, flourishing, again, doing well, living well. It's about the doing well, not the product, the doing, the living, that's what it is. That's what he's saying. What intellectual excellence do we need to cultivate if we're going to live happily, live well, flourish? And as I've said already, this intellectual excellence is, of course, wisdom, or in Greek, phronesis. Oh, that's a good word, phronesis. The Greeks have so many words about intelligence. You can tell, here, I'll just throw that chart back up here. You see all these different words about being smart or intelligent from a wide range of ways. And Aristotle's just like, trying to classify them all. Oh, it's awesome. Anyway, so wisdom, phronesis, concerns being able to choose the correct action in a given situation. It's not about producing anything. Again, wisdom, the wisdom of phronesis, is about choosing the correct action in a given situation. And that's the way that then one acts well, one then lives well through all these actions. So again, we can see that the wisdom of phronesis is another type of excellence. That's part of the calculative deliberative knowledge, because again, it's about action. However, before I go any further into wisdom, I want to pause just for a second and look at all these other intellectual excellences. We've seen now 4, right? We've seen the intellectual accomplishment of Sophia, the systematic knowledge of episteme, we've seen the intelligence of nous, and now we've seen the technical expertise of techne. And of course, techne can go in lots of different directions. And now you, though, the student, might be saying, Professor, what the heck does this have to do with ethics and morality? This intro ethics? This is not intro to math, logic, dancing, music, engineering. What are all these things? And Aristotle would say, if he was alive, Aristotle would say, he's been dead a while, he would say, look, yes, there's a lot of different excellences here. And yeah, excellence as you normally understand it is probably like that list, here it is, of all these excellences of character. Because, of course, these excellences of character are supposed to be guiding our actions and our behavior, and how, of course, you interact with other people. And yes, the wisdom of phronesis will help you do all of that. But Aristotle would continue here. He'd say, yes, those excellences of character, that's probably ethics you know. And of course, the most important then intellectual excellence there is, of course, wisdom of phronesis, being able to handle that. But look, Aristotle would say, why did we start talking about excellence of character? Because we talked about them because they were essential to your self-mastery, right? The mastery of the subservient part of your soul, the mastery of your emotions, the mastery of your desires, the mastery of your appetites. Because Aristotle thinks, right, he says, you will not live well. You will not live happily. You will not live a flourishing life. You will just live as a slave, right, to those emotions, a slave to your desires, a slave to your appetites. And that's not a happy human life. That might be an acceptable animal life, but that is not a happy human life. And so the self-mastery of those things, to make reason the master of the emotions, desires, and appetites, that is essential for the happiness of eudaimonia, Aristotle says. But mastery of these desires, that's not enough, he says. That's a good chunk of it to live well, to live happily, but you also must cultivate the other excellences of your soul as well, and that's those other intellectual excellences. So I think Aristotle would say, yes, you should have enough intellectual accomplishment of Sophia, for instance, so that you are a critical thinker, right? So you can read a newspaper and assess what you're seeing there. And of course, I think Aristotle would say you should also develop some basic areas of technical expertise, basic areas of techne, so that maybe you can at least heat up some ramen noodles. Maybe add an egg to it while you're cooking it. Oh, it's so good. An egg in your ramen noodles, you'll eat like a king. And maybe you should know the techne of how to sew a button. Maybe when you find someone you love, you learn the basic techne so you can dance with them, right? You don't have to be a master sewer, a master dancer, a master chef. But you should at least know some basic stuff. Again, basic stuff, critical thinking, basic cooking, sewing, dancing. And of course, you should then think about which of these things you really should develop, right? Maybe there's an intellectual excellence that interests you. Some of you will become scientists. Some of you become mathematicians. Some of you become engineers or artisans or doctors or dancers, musicians, whatever. Each life you pursue will require an excellence of intellect somewhere. And of course, the key idea is, in doing all that, you're making your plans, you're plotting, you're planning your structured life, you're then leading that structured life. And Aristotle just says to do that well, you're going to have to develop your intellectual capacities to some extent. Yes, your intellectual basic ones for cooking, basic sewing, basic dancing, basic, music appreciation, maybe. Basic, critical thinking. And then you'll get to choose, though, which of those you develop fully. And that development of that mind, that part of your mind, or that ability will become how you live well, how you live happily, how you lead that flourishing life, how you're going to make your plans and lead that structured life. And I think that's all really cool, as you can probably tell, because Aristotle is emphasizing that all these different areas of intellect, it's not just about good character. Living happily also involves developing different areas of your intellect. Some more than others, that's understandable, but trying that is essential to living happily, to having eudaimonia. Of course, Of course. This is a course on ethics. So we should get back to then ethics, with wisdom, with phronesis, because that's what's needed for the excellences of character for sure. But first, I think it is snack break time. I could use some Cheetos. I just bought a fresh bag. Yay. I'm going to eat some. You find something nice to do for yourself, and then we'll come back and chat a bit more about wisdom.